Okay, it is official. We have hit the record button and we are back with another episode of the Labournauts ZoomCast, Labournauts podcast. We're all the things, joined by one of our favorite guests and one of my closest friends, Crystal Warner. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me again.
Zooming in all the way from Ottawa. I'm sure the weather there is not as nice as it is here, just because Vancouver weather is always lovely. It never rains in Vancouver.
So I think snow just left my backyard a couple weeks ago.
Well,
Legit,
okay.
Just left my back. Yeah.
Well, it's legitimately nicer here then.
And then the last 2 days have been so hot that my cats have given up on everything. They're just
when you leave the house, do you have to bring an emergency change of clothes? Have you got beach wear and snow wear?
I definitely bring okay, I'm going to speak to the women out there. I definitely bring a second shirt or oh yeah.
I guess you would have to, right?
It's rough here. It's rough. And the humidity, oof, I miss BC.
And we miss you too. So for folks that haven't listened to you on our podcast before or don't know who you are, Crystal is joining us from the Canada Employment and Immigration Union, and you are the National Executive Vice President there. And you've been on our podcast, I think this is time number 4 or 5. One of those. And it's been mostly about Phoenix, the Phoenix pay system. It seems like this is how I can it's the one constant in the Labournauts has been Phoenix.
Oh, you're saying this like it's a good thing. This is a you can rely on
no,
us.
this is what I'm saying. I feel like it's
about workers not being paid.
It's the one thing that I feel like the Labournauts have not won yet. We haven't pushed. We did a TransLink podcast the other week, and bam, they got funding. We get people elected all the time. After we did a podcast, you probably got elected into something. We have not figured out how to solve this Phoenix pay system stuff. And I don't want to just have you on to talk about that, but the Phoenix pay system stuff and intertwined with the fact that your members are actually the ones that are administering CERB or CERB. I think it gave me that pause for thought and really made me think that you should come back on, because it's really important that folks not only recognize what kind of working situation your members are dealing with when they're at work, but then also what it's like to be at the point that they're at right now after the last, is it 4 years now of Phoenix pay system? And so for folks that don't know about the work that your members do and about kind of, when I say the Phoenix pay system, what that means, maybe could you give us a little bit of some information around that?
Absolutely. So CEIU, we represent over 24,000 members now. Numbers keep climbing. That primarily work at the Immigration and Refugee Board, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, and Service Canada. The majority of our members come from Service Canada. So these are the good people that are, as you mentioned, administering part of the CERB program. CRA is, of course, also administering part of the CERB program. My members do CPP, OAS, employment insurance, immigration, asylum claims, and so on. We are, of course, the second largest component of the Public Service Alliance of Canada. And the PSAC is our bargaining agent. So we have, of course, been without a contract since June 20th, 2018. And we are still hoping to have a contract negotiated. So, yeah, so that's us in a nutshell right now.
I was going to say, it's almost like that's the horrible cherry on top, is that, while you're doing all of the work that it's taking to support members during COVID, you also are still trying to bargain, and you're still trying to figure out the Phoenix pay system. So for folks should go back to one of our first podcasts, when I actually came to your house when you lived in Vancouver. And we kind of made a joke at that time. I still think it's one of the worst jokes I've told, even though I've told some really bad jokes. And when I said the government at that time was saying that by Halloween of 2017,
Yep.
or 2016, that you folks were going to get paid again. And we kind of laughed about it. We're like, ha 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 ha. Yeah, sure. It'll happen Halloween. And here we are 4 years later. And I'm assuming your folks still cannot expect a secure or a consistent form of getting paid for the work that they're doing.
We're still having problems. Granted, it's not as bad as it was the first couple of years, but the problems persist. And unfortunately, the employers maintain this approach of like, they haven't gone back to deal with the oldest cases. So the worst and the oldest cases are still in the system. And instead, it was like at some point they decided, here's what we're going to do. 2 years into this mess, now we're going to triage new files, and then we'll get to like the old ones when we can. So somebody who's retired, right? A lot of people have retired, whatever. We had a lot of baby boomers, retiring and so on. And are owed 2 weeks of vacation, are owed 3 months of acting pay, whatever. It's been 4 years and their files are not being actioned, right? So they still haven't figured out how to properly deal with this, and problems still do continue to arise.
How does that, I mean, that seems like the opposite way you would tackle it. Like it seems like you would start with the oldest cases and then work your way up. And
we've argued that several times. And they're like, that's our decision, and this is what we're sticking to, and this is what Treasury Board told us to do. So
okay, so I'm just gonna ask this question. Hopefully people are getting paid through CERB better than the workers are through Phoenix.
So I gotta tell you something. I had a labor management meeting, I think last week. And I just about lost my mind for numerous reasons. And one of the things that I said just in the heat of the moment was, how is it that my members have figured out how to pay millions of Canadians and you can't figure out how to pay your employees? And I used some more colorful language when I said that. But that's what it comes down to. We figured out, it's actually amazing, and I'll credit where credit's due. It is amazing that they have been able to pay so many people in such a quick amount of time, right? It's amazing. Look at other countries going on in the US, right? It's a disaster. So credit where credit's due. But again, it shows you where they value their workers. And this is the federal government, right? This is the federal. So you figure out almost overnight how to pay millions of Canadians, but you cannot figure out how to pay your employees, right?
Yeah.
So, and we've been without a contract forever. And like, so how does that make us feel as the workers, right? When we clearly are the last on their priority list, yet they're receiving all kinds of accolades for our work on our backs, and we're not even being paid properly.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like obviously, if they had the will to fix Phoenix,
100%,
it would get done, because they clearly found a way, and they have the will to get Canadians paid during this pandemic. And that's good. Like, that's like, no one is saying that that's not good. And thank you to every single one of your members and the CRA workers and PSAC members that are doing the work that it's taking to pay folks that desperately need it. But that doesn't mean that federal workers don't need it.
Like, right, exactly.
And you know, we were talking before we hit record that another layer to this, specific to your union, is just how many women are members of your union. You were saying, was it 70%?
77% of CEIU members are women. So we are the largest component at the largest bargaining table in North America. I believe the second largest in the world. I have to look that up again and double check that. But certainly the largest in North America, right? So the PA bargaining table, programs and administration, that's our bargaining table. And 77% of my membership is women. This is administrative. It's an administrative table, and we have a lot of parents, a lot of young parents. There's an emerging younger workforce, and a lot of young families, a lot of single mothers. So can you imagine? So a lot of my members are what we call, I'm going to use government language for half a second, and then I'm going to explain it. CR4s, right?
Okay.
So that's like a clerk. It's an entry level position into the federal government. You're probably making about $50,000 a year. So what are you actually netting that, what are you actually bringing home? You're probably bringing home 1,100, 1,200 every 2 weeks, right? So if you're in a major city and under the conservative government, right, what did they do? They moved all of us into major cities. So you're living in Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, you'll have 2 kids, you're a single parent, and you're bringing home $1,100 in cash every 2 weeks, right? And then they fuck up your pay.
Yeah.
And then you get 70% of your 1,100 or your 1,200. And then now we're 4 years later, and you're still, and maybe you've climbed up the ladder a bit, right? So you're a programs manager or something, you're a programs officer, and you're entitled to more money, but you're still in debt with the bank or with your family, or you quit, or you got like I was talking to a woman in Toronto a month ago, she has 2 part-time jobs, right? And so maybe that's your life now. So yes, disproportionately affecting women, Phoenix, disproportionately affecting equity women. It's been awful. And every time we talk about this, I get emotional because it's impossible not to.
So how does it work when you layer COVID on top of that? Like how, because it's obviously like what you're describing is what was already going on before we found ourselves in a pandemic. So like are they working from home? Are they working from in centers or?
Yeah, so I think at our immigration departments, we've got about 5% of the workforce that's still physically reporting to offices, so a very small amount. Okay. Service Canada is a bit higher. I'm not sure what the exact numbers are, but it's a bit higher. But yes, the majority are currently working from home. So like the people that are administering serve and taking calls on the call center and stuff, a lot of those folks are working at home. Not everyone, right? It took a long time to get laptops and get so on. So then what does that look like? So a lot of my members are parents, and so they don't have childcare right now. So they're taking care of their kids all day. And a lot of, I think Gen Xers and being that sandwich generation, and you've got, your parents, a lot of our members have their parents living with them. They have children. So they're, responsible for all these people in their home. And a lot of people living in smaller dwellings, and then they're being expected to produce, right? And they want to they want to help. I have people calling me in tears about wanting to serve Canadians and the people in their community that desperately need access and whatever, and they are getting a lot of pressure from their employer to produce, and it's been challenging because there are unrealistic expectations that the employer is saying to them. So, and now they're starting this new thing where it's like they'll call you and grill you. So Carlos, okay, you've got a kid. Well, how many hours a week, does the child's mother have? And then how like stuff that's none of their business.
What?
Yes. Yeah. How many hours does
you just role played that, and you gave me the goosebumps, and I was like instantly, I was like, you can't ask me that, Crystal. What are you talking about?
How many hours?
What?
And then when she's there, what's her nap schedule like? And like maybe you could do a couple hours, couldn't you? Like between 11 and 1, and then we're going to monitor that, and then we're going to check. And if we notice, because the federal government, we have the internal chats, right? So we're gonna check that internal chat and make sure it's green and make sure that you're online. And then we're gonna call you, and then maybe we're gonna force you to take vacation time so it's starting to get twitchy. There was a moment, and certainly with some of the departments where we represent workers, there has been a lot of compassion, a lot of erring on the side of compassion, a lot of consideration. There is now this like overarching concern of, we have to answer to Canadians, this taxpayer dollar. Yeah, of course it is. And fair enough, right? And fair enough. And so that's why people are working their tails off, because they're proud public servants, right? And look at all the wonderful work that they've achieved. So like, how is it helping you that the 100 employees that you have that are telling you that they have 10 people in their house and that they're finding it impossible to work? How hard is it for you to be compassionate and understanding in those situations?
Yeah.
So,
and I agree. But then when I think about the fact that they clearly are not compassionate about the way you were getting paid before this,
Hmm.
assuming that they're going to be compassionate now seems like a stretch. Like, I don't know who these people are,
Hmm.
because I just, like having those kind of conversations with a person, never mind if it's a single mother that's trying to help take care of, maybe she's trying to help take care of her parents and her kids at the same time as trying to get this work done. I don't know who these people are, because I could never ask somebody those types of questions or ask them
Hmm.
to like go above and beyond. Like, they're already going above and beyond, and still I'll still go back to, and there's no real guarantee that they're going to get paid, which is like ultimately
Hmm.
the saddest thing out of all of this. Because one thing I've learned a lot actually from being friends with you, Crystal, is that like the people who sign up to do public servant jobs, particularly I would say for government, they're doing that because they actually take that seriously. Like the servant job, the service to other humans, to Canadians, that's a very, very important piece of why they do that work. It's not for the bags of money, clearly, because even if there was
Hmm.
bags of money, you might not get it because of Phoenix.
Hmm.
But they're doing it because they're passionate, and it's the line of work that they've chosen. And so it feels like I don't know what I can't imagine what it must feel like to be invested emotionally into doing a certain type of work, but then not feeling like you're getting any type of dignity from the
Hmm.
employer, right? It's just
Yeah.
it's an equation for such a bad workplace and horrible retention. Like, I'm sure it's hard to keep members.
I think that the retention period that we were told this week at the call centers was 10%.
Yeah,
So
which is
it's,
like,
yeah.
that's not like, you and I are not business people, clearly, um, but I don't think that's good for business. Like, I don't have a huge business acumen, but I'm
Hmm.
feeling like that's not good for business.
One thing that COVID has really augmented as well is political presence in the workplace.
Mm,
So like before all of this, for the last few years, one of the biggest like political challenges that we've had, because we are federal government, of course, is like immigration, right? And so for a while there, our
mm,
immigration departments were under a lot of scrutiny by Parliament. And so like I had to appear before the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Immigration, to advocate for my members. We were in the media constantly, and there was a lot of pressure about the asylum process, a lot of criticism about how that was working and whatever. And it was interesting to watch. I mean, it was awful, but I'm going to respectfully call it interesting now, 3 years later, to watch how the politics on the Hill played out in the workplace and what it meant for my members.
mm,
And that was my first sort of real personal experience in my current position at a national leadership position, seeing how that dynamic correlates and what that means and how important it is for us as the union to have influence on the Hill and to have those relationships on the Hill, right? Because so much of what was happening was being influenced there. But it was one topic, right? We were talking about like asylum intake and how that was going. And it was, I don't want to say manageable, but like we managed it. And like, I think we're in a better place today. But since COVID hit, everything we do is the cover of the media.
mm.
And politicians are on us, and the media is on us. Like, I don't know if it helps at all, but like I've been turning down media for the last month. You're the first person I've spoken to
Wow.
that's like media outside of, like
I'm,
in over a month. Like
I don't I don't think I wouldn't quite call this media, but yeah, fair
but
fair enough.
the first interview I've done, aside from some other stuff which we'll talk about later, but like, but like turning down like newspapers,
Mm,
radio, TV, because it was getting so much. There was a month where we were, our national president and myself were just like constantly talking to the media about what was going on, and we weren't doing our friggin' job because we were so busy talking to
mm,
people. And so at some point we were like, we're done with this. Like we have to go. There's conversations right now. We need a minute here to figure this shit out. We need a minute here. We need some space here to sit down with the employer and figure this out. because we want to make sure that we're taking every precaution so that our members are protected and their health and safety is considered and protected while we serve Canadians, right?
And
So it's been a journey.
Well, that gets to kind of a story that you were telling me before we started, and about protecting your members, and that was kind of the situations at actual Service Canada locations, and what you had to, the lengths you had to go to ensure that they were safe because of what was happening at these places, about people lining up outside and demanding things, really putting workers in a scenario that no workers should ever be in.
That's it. So that people know, before the Service Canada centers close their doors, and to be clear, the services never stopped. Yes, we closed the in-person doors except for accessibility. There have been people that had accessibility concerns this whole time that we have continued to serve in person. But we moved to online systems, we moved to phone-in appointments and so on, right? But before we took that measure, it was very dangerous in a lot of our offices, and our members started to do work refusals because people were coming in. And just a few examples, I remember in 1 2-day period, we had somebody go into an office in Montreal and throw a Purell station, and a family come in Scarborough, in Ontario. A family comes in, they started, because they weren't social distancing in the lineup, somebody was refusing to social distance. These two guys get into a fist fight. We have to call the cops. And then like our staffer, somebody, we had reports of people getting spit on, by angry members of the public that were like desperate. And we get it. People were desperate. Yeah. People were losing their jobs and they were desperate for support. You have to put food on the table and feed your family. So we understand, but the employer did not take enough measures to keep us safe. There's no plexiglass in Service Canada centers, right? Everywhere else you go, there's some sort of we have none. We have been asking for years. Still, well, now we're in talks, right? Because we're talking about reopening, and that's one of the union's demands before we feel comfortable reopening. Yeah. We need plexi, but it's been 2.5 months. Still not there. So listen, so there was things that needed to happen before we felt comfortable, and they weren't listening, right? They weren't listening. So we had to, I joke and I say to my friends, like, we had to take it to the streets. We went on social media, right? We went on social media. We reached out to politicians. We told them our stories, and then they helped us. And finally we were able to get meetings with the minister and close the doors because they weren't taking the measures in. And I just want to say one more thing on this. We never wanted to do that. That was the last thing that my members ever wanted to do. And what we are trying to do now, before we reopen, is to ensure that there's enough safety measures in place so that, God forbid, when the next pandemic, or 5 years from now, or 2 years from now, we are prepared so that we can continue our services. Mm-hmm. But the way that the offices are set up today, our members are not safe, and we will not go to work unless we are safe.
Yeah, and that's, it's just, that's paramount in the work that unions do. And let's be honest, this isn't a union, non-union thing. No worker should be forced to work in a place that isn't safe. That's not, just shouldn't be okay. Actually, I'm pretty sure that's law. At least here in BC, you have the right to refuse unsafe work. Hey, that's the reality, right? And this sounds like something that you folks have been working on. I love the taking it to the streets part, and that's actually, I think, how we became close friends, is from taking our issues to the streets, and banging not pots and pans but waving signs and yelling through megaphones at airports. But that's for a different podcast. But I think, so I applaud your union for standing up and doing that, because again, like I said, I know your folks, your members, are so dedicated to the work that they do. And the last thing you want to do is shut these places down, because people do need to feel like they have somewhere they can go to get support. But the reality is, it's not supporting anybody if the workers can't be safe themselves.
And that's it. And it was disgusting to me, the response that we got when the doors had to close. We had the premier of Alberta go on live television and call my members lazy because we closed I was like, They never stopped working. Nobody ever stopped working. We closed the door because we were getting hit and spit on, and Purell stations tossed at us.
And when's the last time that guy saw a treadmill? I mean, come on, bro. Like,
but like his whole, and also he sent his workers home in Alberta. You sent your provincial workers home, and you're going to shit on the federal government for, anyways, this guy needs to check himself. But not just him, right? It wasn't just the premier of Alberta, but like there were other politicians and media and people all over just attacking the workers, and it's like, did you understand that we were not safe? And so they did what they had to do, right? When we're in the middle of a pandemic and people are dying out there and you're getting spit on at work because you don't have freaking plexiglass to protect you.
Yeah.
Right.
And we could argue till the end, like, is the plexiglass even going to be enough? Or
that's
is
a
it
whole
not?
other thing.
But that's another thing. But regardless, like you need to do something to protect your workers. That is the responsibility of the employer. And, this ties into the responsibility that I honestly feel that unions have. I think right now, not just right now, like when our members are in times of need, unions step up. Historically, this is what unions have always done. They step up to support and represent those members. Well, I mean, in my working life, I can't think of a time when it's been so important for unions to step up and make sure that they're representing workers, not only to ensure their workplaces are safe, but also to communicate with their members. I think a lot of folks, not just union members, but I think working people want to hear from different people than just mainstream media. Like they want to hear what working people are actually feeling. And I think it's our responsibility. And I know that's one of the things that, at the Labournauts, like we take that seriously because it's important that we're getting out in front of union and non-union workers and saying, hey, these are your rights. This is what you should be fighting for. This is what you deserve. And this is somewhere where hopefully you can get, I don't want to say real news because it seems like just too easily juxtaposed to fake news, but you actually, you're hearing comments and you're hearing the words coming from the actual workers,
right?
Which I think more and more people are wanting to hear from us. And it's our responsibility, I think, to give folks that content and to give them our perspective, because I'm not convinced that they're getting it if they watch CBC or just read the Globe and Mail. So that actually ties me into perfectly into something that I just happened to come upon. I'm flipping through the old interwebs, going through the Facebooks, and I see Crystal with two other sisters in the movement who, did you start your own podcast? I feel like this is a great. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but it's called Point of Privilege. Been doing, I don't know if you've done it beyond Facebook or if it's just like a Facebook live kind of chat that you've been having. Tell me
this is a completely like informal, uncoordinated a fireside discussion, and it was my friend Megan Butterill. She's the chair of a women's committee in our union in the National Capital Region here in Ottawa, and we were just like talking, and we were like, I wonder if other people would be interested in hearing what we're talking about or want to contribute. Let's go live. And literally that's what we just figured. We're like, how do we get the Zooms to work on the Facebooks, and how does this work here? And
you look like a boomer.
Literally, totally. That's exactly what happened. And we were like, and then we're live, and we're like, oh dang. And then we had a conversation, and like, I don't know, it was like a couple hundred people, 300 people or something watched it, right? And we're like, well, that's cool. Let's do it again next week, and we'll talk about something else. Have a glass of wine. We'll talk. I'll swear. It'll be great. And so then we go live again the following week, and then a couple hundred more people watch, and we're like, oh, they are interested in this. And then we did it again, and the last week we had over 500 viewers on the live show. So look, all we're doing is it's direct live Zoom feed on Facebook. Somebody, a friend of a friend of a friend watched it, literally a friend of a friend of a friend watched it and was like, hey, I could turn this into a podcast for you guys after you do the live. And we're like, oh, okay, cool. That'd be great. Cause then you could edit it, and Crystal swears too much. So then that would help with that. And so then let's make it a podcast after we go live. The idea has started to become like, and it started first like under CEIU's name. Like with the first couple, we did it under CEIU's name. And I gotta say, that's hard because you pigeonhole yourself. It meant that we couldn't invite people from outside of our union, and then it also meant that I constantly had to wear, instead of Crystal Warner union actor, just workers activist or whatever, I had to wear my CEIU hat all the time, and it was constraining. And it also got like a little controversial, with then people, it's like, well, is this the voice of the, whatever? And we're like, okay, we need out of this pigeonhole, and we need to be able to give. And then when we got more viewers, we're like, okay, what do we want to achieve, right? So we want to keep it as informal as possible, but we also want to try and use our platform, if we have one, to afford people, especially like women or equity seeking members, a platform to speak about issues, both in the workplace and within the union. And so basically now what it's literally come down to is, it's really important to me that we keep it as, like I said, as informal as possible. I don't want this to get bureaucratic. I don't want it to get complicated. I don't want there to be false expectations. We do know that the people watching, that number is increasing and increasing. We do know that there's an impact. I've started to get, we had over 100 comments on the last one. People care. So if we do have this platform to give people to have a dialogue, then we're just trying to share our stories and have some real talk about what's going on at work and what's going on in the union. So
I think it's awesome. I think we need more of that, like more and more and more of regular folks having regular conversations and opening the door for more people to kind of have these conversations, because I think the reality is a lot of people are already having these talks, or maybe if they're not even having the talks with their friends or family, they're thinking these things, right? So by opening the door and letting people come into your conversations, hearing what you folks are talking about, and then even potentially taking part, I think that's huge. That's awesome. Kudos for doing that. And hopefully people from this podcast will go over and check out the Point of Privilege. That's awesome. Okay. So if folks want to, as we kind of slowly wrap this up, if folks want to help with the Phoenix pay system stuff, or just try to follow you or figure out how they can support your members and members of PSAC, how would they do that? Where do they go?
So there's a psacunion.ca website. And right now that if people go there, there's campaigns to get Treasury Board back to the table, to give us a collective agreement, to give us a settlement on Phoenix. But like anything else, it's political pressure. So we would definitely ask people, if they're talking to their representatives during this time, if you're talking to your MPs, please listen and say, listen, you're not even paying your own employees. So how can I trust you if you're not fairly compensating your own employees? So we would definitely appreciate that kind of support right now.
Awesome. And this is something that I've said before, but I want folks to think about it. Like, it's no worker should go to work and not get paid. Everybody agrees with that. I would argue, though, the folks that go to work and get paid with our dollars, for sure they should get paid. I want to make sure that the money that I'm investing, or the money that I'm paying, because I'm quite proud of paying the taxes that I pay and all that kind of stuff, I want to make sure that the people that deserve that money for the work they're doing are actually getting it. I think that's really vital. Look, thanks again, Crystal. I'm sure we'll talk again. Maybe the next one, it'll be when you ratify a new agreement.
Woo, that'd be great.
Maybe. Or maybe we can have the whole Point of Privilege crew on. Who knows?
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. So please, everybody, make sure to follow Crystal. Check out Point of Privilege. Also, you can find the Labournauts at Labournauts on all things social media. You can find me at Say Hi to Carlos on all things social media. Thank you again, friend.
Thank you.
Really, really appreciate it. All right, everybody. Take care. Stay safe.